Hello there, this is Group 4 of GED110 B1, and we are here to tackle about humans as invasive species, raising awareness among the anthropogenic effects of flora, nitrogen cycle, and sulfur cycle. But first, let's talk about ecological reservoir, or the environment. Merriam-Webster defines environment as the conditions that surround someone or something, and the conditions and influences that affects the growth, health, process, and etc. of it. This just interprets that the environment of every living being is essential in taking part in the organism's growth and situation. If the environment of a living being is not providing what the organism needs, the organism might adapt, move places, or go extinct. Humans, sadly, take a huge part in destroying the natural habitat of living beings like marine and forest animals. Irresponsible waste disposal, individual or industrial, overfishing, overhunting, illegal logging, and others are some of the examples of it. To create a better world, we must generate solutions in fixing our mistakes for the betterment of other species. Moving on to our topic, let's talk about biogeochemical cycle. According to Bioge, the word biogeochemical is derived from the words bio for biosphere, geo for geological components, and chemical for the elements that move through the cycle in our Earth. The major elements necessary for this cycle are carbon, nitrogen, hydrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and sulfur. Biogeochemical cycle are basically divided into two types, which are the gaseous cycles that includes carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, and the water cycle, while the sedimentary cycles include sulfur, phosphorus, rock cycle, and others. My friend here will tackle about flora, nitrogen, and sulfur cycle, together with their importances.
Before we get into the main agenda of this video, allow me first to define and expound the terms that will be highlighted throughout the video. First, we have the flora. The term flora pertains to both the plants that grow in a certain area and also to the publication of scientific descriptions of those plants. It could include anything from a discrete set of plants that found in a given location to a more thorough and detailed description of those plants. Generally, flora is the representation of the whole plant kingdom. Next, we define nitrogen cycle. The nitrogen cycle is a biogeochemical cycle wherein the nitrogen is turned into various chemical forms as it circulates through the atmosphere, land, and water ecosystems. Both biological and physical processes are observed to convert nitrogen in this cycle. The significant processes in nitrogen cycle includes the following. First, we have nitrogen fixation. By atmospheric, industrial, and biological processes, it transforms nitrogen gas into nitrates and nitrites. To be taken up by plants, atmospheric nitrogen must be converted or fixed into a usable form. Next, we have nitrification. In this process, a soil-dwelling bacteria and other nitrifying bacteria are largely responsible for converting ammonium to nitrate. The oxidation of ammonium is carried out in the initial phase of nitrification by bacteria such as the Nitrosomonas species, which transforms ammonia into nitrites. Nitrobacter and other bacteria are the one that converts nitrites to nitrates. Because ammonia gas is damaging to plants, it is critical to convert it to nitrates or nitrites. Next, we have aminification. The nitrogen in an organism's tissue is in the form of organic nitrogen, such as amino acids or DNA, when it releases waste or dyes. Aminification occurs when various fungi and prokaryotes degrade the tissue and releases inorganic nitrogen as ammonia back into the ecosystem. Plants and other microorganisms can take up the ammonia and use it to sustain. Lastly, we have denitrification. It is the process of transforming nitrate into nitrogen gas, which eliminates bioavailable nitrogen from the atmosphere and returns it to it. Denitrification generates dinitrogen gas as the final product. Although there are many nitrogen gases intermediates, This happens in both free-living microbes and anaerobic ciliate obligate symbiotes. Next, the sulfur cycle is a representation of sulfur's transit through the geosphere and biosphere. Weathering releases sulfur from rocks, which is then absorbed by microbes and plants. It's then transmitted up the food chain, where it is assimilated by plants and animals before being released as they disintegrated. Both atmospheric and terrestrial processes are included in the sulfur cycle. This procedure is divided into 4 stages, which are the following. First, we have mineralization. It is the mineralization of organic sulfur into inorganic forms such as hydrogen sulfide and sulfide minerals. Next, we have oxidation. It is the process of an element or compound losing an electron. A sulfide oxidation and a sulfur oxidation are both parts of sulfur cycle, and both of these processes is carried out by a bacteria or in anaerobic conditions like a hot spring. Next, we have reduction. Sulfate reduction is an anaerobic microbe-mediated process that converts sulfate to sulfide. These bacteria are a genetically and physiologically varied group that are generally found in watery habitats, where they operate as a decomposing organic matter. Lastly, we have incorporation. Sulfide is converted into organic molecules in this process. Metal-containing derivatives fall within this category. Microorganisms have the ability to immobilize sulfur compounds, which leads to their integration into the organic form of sulfur. Last term we need to define is anthropogenic effects. Basically, anthropogenic is connected to or originating from human influence on the natural world. Anthropogenic effects refers to the end result on the environment, which are the changes to biophysical settings, ecosystems, biodiversity, and natural resources, all of which are caused directly or indirectly by human activity.
Have you ever heard of the anthropogenic effects? Well, as cited by De La Rocha et al. 2008, anthropogenic effects are described as the human impact on biodiversity, direct or indirect, which involves 4 basic factors. 1. Overexploitation of natural resources. 2. Habitat modification, conversion, and fragmentation. 3. The introduction of exotic species. And 4. Pollution. Any of these 4 factors may influence ecosystem composition, structure and function, ecological processes, and biodiversity, especially through species extinction. Here we have listed down 8 anthropogenic effects that have interconnected repercussions between human activities and the nitrogen and sulfur cycle. First, we have the increased anthropogenic nitrogen emissions. Humans produce more reactive nitrogen than natural ecosystems, primarily nitrogen oxides and ammonia, mostly from food and energy production and consumption, as well as byproducts. Increased greenhouse gas emissions, acidic deposition, and excess nitrogen nutritional inputs to recipient habitats are all caused by reactive nitrogen emissions into the atmosphere. Nitrous oxide, one of the nitrogen forms, is a significant greenhouse gas with a very long atmospheric half-life that is released by agricultural operations as well as natural processes like denitrification in wetlands. We look at the long-term trends in nitrogen and nitrous oxide emissions, as well as the information gaps that exist right now. Next, we have greenhouse gas emissions. Nitrous oxide is a powerful greenhouse gas with a global warming potential 300 times that of carbon dioxide per molecule. Nitrous oxide is produced during both denitrification and nitrification. The amount of nitrous oxide in the atmosphere is predicted to have grown by 18% from pre-industrial times. The increase is mostly linked to human activity, notably agriculture and land use change. Third is the altered nitrogen biogeochemistry in ecosystems. Increasing anthropogenic nitrogen emissions are a substantial source of atmospheric nitrogen deposition to land and sea, as well as contributing to global warming via nitrous oxide emissions, disrupting nitrogen pools, cycling, and transport in and among ecosystems. Next is the impact on biodiversity and human society. As previously stated, increases in anthropogenic nitrogen emission and deposition have a significant impact on nitrogen pools, cycles, and transit within ecosystems. The change in behavior affects the architecture and properties of species in both natural ecosystems and anthropogenically controlled systems. We examine how increasing nitrogen impacts biological structures in the context of biodiversity, as well as human society in the context of human health and ecological services. Next on the list is the terrestrial biodiversity impacts. Nitrogen pollution encourages competitive interactions that affect the makeup of the environment, rendering certain species circumstances undesirable. The potential benefits of nitrogen fertilization for subordinate species may be outweighed by the loss of light and nutrients caused by the increased cover of aggressive dominating species. Changes in biodiversity can have cascading effects on primary input. Soil carbon storage, microbial activity, decomposition rates, nitrogen mineralization and demobilization, tissue chemistry, trophic interactions, and ecosystem functions and services. Next, we have the rapid effects of hydrogen sulfide. Hydrogen sulfide rapidly oxidizes the gas that dissolves in water to form sulfurous and sulfuric acids. These compounds contribute in large part to the acid rain that can kill sensitive aquatic organisms and damage marble monuments and stone buildings. Lastly, the damaging effects of sulfur compounds. Sulfur compounds may also be associated with important environmental damages, as well as sulfur dioxide damages vegetation, or when acidic drainages associated with sulfide minerals degrade ecosystems. Sulfur dioxide is a gas that can be toxic to plants at concentrations much smaller than 1 part per million in the atmosphere, and to animals at larger concentrations.
The moment you hear the term invasive species, the stereotype that most people would have the thought of are wildly untamed animals such as tigers or even venomous spiders that hides in plain sight and are always ready to attack those who are in its way. Well, given the concept, it is already partially correct, but it is missing the main concept of what it takes for an organism to be considered an invasive species. For a creature to be labeled as an invasive one, it must embark on factors along the lines of having the ability to cause both great economic and environmental harm to the area they are invading. At the same time, it should also have the capability to push back the original organisms living in the area by taking their territory and methods of reproducing quickly and consuming at a fast pace. In this presentation, there are given 15 examples of typical invasive species that cannot be in harmony with stated examples of their chosen breed. Majority of the list consists of plants that are able to grow in rapid succession, which causes other plants in the area to be affected with their own growth, resulting for the invasive species to completely take over control of the specific environment by not letting the other plants to grow out since the nutrients they need are absorbed by the invasive species. Additionally, with plants, there are also particular plants that contain harmful substances that could poison friendly insects that help in taking care of the environment by assisting the cycle of life. Examples are friendly bees, which takes pollen from flowers and spread them to other plants, but are then cut off after mindlessly landing in a plant that poisons them. Worst case scenario are for the bees to die off or forced to spread the poison to other plants and insects nearby. For the next species, insects are a popular example to be invasive. Most notably are lices that leeches on other mammals nearby such as dogs or cows that takes the nutrients from their body. Despite the mammal being friendly and contributing to the environment, said lices can take their life and could lead to lack of animals nearby that is crucial to continue in maintaining the deemed live condition of the area. Lastly, we humans too are considered to be invasive species, keeping in mind that the land we live in and took for ourselves were originally from different creatures that roamed the land. But after building establishments and other buildings, we managed to push off animals from their own territory, meaning that we must not underestimate the potential of other organisms we are coexisting with, since the possibility to evolve and could be forced to invade other ecosystems after humans damage their homes. though it is still achievable to envision a world where all existing organisms currently can be in agreement and tranquility by respecting their own areas.
We are ironically affected by the air pollution we create, which contributes to global warming. This surge is an issue since it is altering the environment quicker than some living organisms can adapt, resulting in the death of forests. Many human activities have a large impact on the nitrogen and sulfur cycle, and it has become evident that we, the people, are responsible for the majority of the warming during the last century. But just as we have contributed to global warming, can we also limit its effects? However, there is a way to make a difference by speaking up in favor of renewable energy, investing in energy efficient things, practicing waste management, and consuming wisely. By voicing your voices, you are inspiring others to be concerned about global warming.